coming across the border in a way that tries to circumvent the law or defy proper procedure is no free ticket to Canada.
That was Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale in Montreal earlier this week. The federal government sent not one, not two, but three ministers to try and reassure the provinces and the public that they are on top of this illegal border crossing issue. It all started, you might remember, last year when President Trump moved to lift his country's temporary protected status for certain immigrant groups. That left them with few options, and in response, Justin Trudeau sent a tweet.
This is an illegal point.
The crush of asylum seekers has not gone away since last year when Justin Trudeau tweeted that message, "Welcome to Canada." Impossible to know if the numbers would have been the same without it, but it was taken by some as an open invitation. The weather warmed up, the people started crossing in Quebec and Manitoba. Roxham Road was quickly overwhelmed, and Trudeau tried to walk it back.
You will not be at advantage if you choose to enter Canada irregularly. You must follow the rules, and there are many.
MPs were dispatched to the U.S. to speak directly to communities and discourage them from coming.
It's not a free ticket to come to Canada.
But 28,000 asylum seekers have entered Canada illegally since the beginning of 2017. Compare that to fewer than 2,500 in all of 2016. And they cannot be turned away without a fair hearing.
You cannot have this year after year after year. The system is just going to burst. And that's real life and reality. So this answer from the federal government is just totally unacceptable.
So what to make of all of this? At Issue is here to weigh in. Chantal Hébert is in Montreal, Andrew Coyne is in Toronto, and Paul Wells joins us tonight here in Ottawa. Good to see you all. I don't know that the government knew that this was going to sort of spiral. I'm not going to say out of control, but spiral to this state. Do you think, Chantal, that they have a workable solution, that they are trying to find a solution to a problem that does just seem to be growing?
Well, the one thing for sure is that there is no magic fix for this. Possibly they didn't see this coming. That tweet you talked about referred to was in response to President Trump's decision to ban people from a number of countries from coming to the U.S. It wasn't in response to what happened afterwards in the States. The agreement that usually keeps people who land first in the U.S. out of Canada has been in place since 2004, and I'm guessing most Canadians didn't hear much about it until President Trump came into office. So it is a new problem, and despite all that you hear, there are no simple fix.
The fact, Andrew, that for the first time the government seemed to be suggesting they would talk about the Safe Third Country Agreement, and that's the agreement Chantal's referring to, that they would at least look at negotiating it. What did that tell you?
Well, it tells you that there is an issue on their hands. They've got a political issue and they've got a real issue. To the extent, I think the tweet probably contributed to it, but there's also a historical context to it, which is that, generally speaking, Canada's immigration and refugee process is, in reality or in perception, is seen as being more lenient than the United States. That's why we have the Safe Third Country Agreement. We asked for it, going back years, because we were trying to stem the flow northward, that people were trying to arbitrage the differences between the two systems. So yes, maybe they didn't anticipate at the time that it was signed that so many people would be taking non-legal routes, although people who were critics of the agreement were predicting that would happen eventually. But as Chantal says, that's the irreducible fact is we can't change an agreement unless we get the Americans to agree to it. They're not going to agree to the thing that's most popularly put forward by the Conservatives, among others, of let's just declare the whole border an entry point, because that would essentially mean more people coming back to the United States having been turned back from Canada. So we've got to find some other thing we can get them to agree on.
So what might that be, Paul? How does the government find this solution? Because it does seem a head-scratcher, and the government doesn't want to be perceived as pushing people away either. I don't think it wants that message out there either.
Well, this is the problem. When Justin Trudeau said everyone's welcome who wants to come to Canada, they were so proud of that tweet. It was more retweeted than any of Donald Trump's tweets up to that time. Staffers in the Prime Minister's office were eager to tell journalists that. And quite logically, there was suddenly a flood of humanity northward to test the thesis. The problem is that Justin Trudeau was telling the truth. It is easier. You are dealt with more leniently here than you have been lately, or than you might have been lately in Donald Trump's United States. And so pedestrian asylum claimants, just like software engineers looking to be hired in Vancouver, are rational actors, and they're going to test for advantage. And as a result, the government's had to really change its tone. It's had to, instead of sending Justin Trudeau out with blankets and jerseys to welcome people at the airport, they've sent out Ahmed Hussein and Ralph Goodale to glower and warn people not to come in.
The problem, though, Chantal, too, is that they do have to process these people, and that is clogging the system. But if you look at, for instance, the processing of Haitians who try to come to Canada and claim refugee status, it's about half and half. I mean, not everybody's getting refugee status. Some people are being turned away. It's just that it takes a long time.
Okay, so here are some solutions. There are no magic fix. The magic fix of declaring the entire border an official border point, well, we could all hold hands and create a human chain, I'm guessing, to enforce that, because otherwise we don't have the resources. Two, international law means that we cannot turn people back, just say you're just going to go home. Right. But it has been found that the U.S. is giving tourist visas, and that makes come across as strange to Canadians, more easily to people than Canadians do. So a lot of the Nigerian would-be asylum seekers are getting tourist visas to the U.S. and then coming over. There is a way to convince possibly the U.S. to be more strict on that. That's one solution. The other, and you alluded to it, is to put more resources into processing the claims, because word of mouth that X number are being rejected is going to do more for you than anything else. Yeah, that you come here and that you're not going to be able to stay. Andrew, last word on this too.
I just would say the priority has got to be to get people to come by lawful means, and that may be a higher priority than trying to limit the numbers. One thing we might be able to get the Americans to do is to say, sort of reverse the situation that we have now, where it's easier and better for people to go the illegal route than the legal route. What if we said, if you come by the lawfully provided points, you will get a hearing. If you go by any other route, we will turn you back. You have to get the Americans to agree to it. It does mean you probably get an increase in people applying to come, but at least we'd be able to do them, process them by lawful means, and once they'd had their hearing, either keep them or send them back to their country of origin.
Okay, I'll let Paul comment on that, and then I'll change topics.
I just think that this is going to get worse before it gets better. And one thing it's doing is it's opening up a substantial area of political opportunity for the Conservatives in Quebec.
Yes.
So far unexploited, although Andrew Scheer is trying hard. Quebecers in particular are very worried about this trend, and they notice that the government to which they contributed an awful lot of MPs in 2015 can't do much about it.
I like that you sort of cast forward to the podcast that people will now have to listen to if they want the rest of the answers to that. This is not what's going to be... Let's change topics just quickly. We only have about 3.5 minutes. Again, Jagmeet Singh tested with his leadership this week, now forced to put another MP, this time a female MP, Christine Moore, on ice. She's not at a caucus. She's sort of on a timeout while they investigate claims that she may have acted inappropriately. Chantal, this is not... I mean, this is sort of what we're talking about in terms of setting the bar for behavior, but what does it tell us about Jagmeet Singh's leadership or the people around him or the decisions they are making here?
Oh, that they're scrambling and kind of making it up as they go along. And one of the reasons for that is that there is no charted path that you can say you can adhere to. But the unhappy thing for Mr. Singh is that he is not in the House of Commons. Yeah. He doesn't get to be seen on television talking about anything other than problems in the NDP caucus, and problems whose solution generates debate most, and that's normal too. So it's a lose-lose for the NDP.
Paul and I were both at an event last night, although I don't think we said hello, but we were both there. And Jagmeet Singh was one of the MCs at Politics in the Pen. And he cracked a lot of jokes about not being in Ottawa. But I do think Chantal's right, Paul, that at some point, not being around all the time, maybe this lets the caucus just sort of, I don't know, they just don't know how to deal with situations like this.
Yeah, it should be said that these sort of parallel and matching claims of harassment are about alleged behavior that predates his arrival as the leader. And I'm not sure that if I was the newly arrived leader of the party, I would be much better at dealing with it. I mean, either there's a long, drawn-out process to try and guarantee some kind of due process, or you just summarily kick people out of the caucus without giving them a chance to defend themselves. Both of those are hard for Jagmeet Singh. But it's compounded by the fact that his caucus doesn't know him, and they are a little too eager in a lot of cases to publicly second-guess him.
Andrew.
I'm not sure I would hang this one on him, except to the extent that they might have known about this more than they're letting on, and I don't know what the facts are on that. But if they knew and didn't do anything about that, makes it more culpable. But I guess, the larger point to me is it's at first surprising that so many of these cases seem to be arising in the party that, at least to believe its rhetoric, would be most concerned about preventing this sort of thing, except maybe it's not so surprising. Maybe there's a culture in the NDP of particularly being quick on the trigger with some of these accusations. And was talking about not having any easy answers. The easy answer of let's just believe all complainants, I think, is now more or less been put to one side. We need to figure out, as you said earlier, Rosie, what the lines are, and we need to figure out what the process is, particularly for people in political life, where there's an extra incentive for people to start accusing people of things.
Yeah, and I'll end with this, Chantal. I'm not saying it should be hung on Jagmeet Singh, but I do think that once you say we believe survivors, without really saying what that means to you, without defining what that means to you, then you put yourself in a corner, and I don't know how you get out of that, Chantal.
I don't know of a justice system where the so-called survivor doesn't have to qualify or prove that he or she qualifies for that statement, and I'm not sure that it doesn't speak to some immaturity on the part of the current leadership team that they're handling it, or they've been handling it this way.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you all. Appreciate it. As we said, as Paul well teased, you're going to have to listen to the At Issue podcast now. You'll get extra content. Of course, what we talked about here in podcast form every week. This week's bonus topic, Andrew Scheer trying to romance Quebec. We'll see if the province is interested after a by-election there. How's he doing so far? Look for it on iTunes, any major podcast app, our website, cbcnews.ca/thenational.